Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host.
Quiet on the set.
Today, we're talking about a new book called The Masters of Makeup Effects, and my guests are the book's authors. First, returning to the show is makeup effects artist Howard Berger, who last spoke with me about his Oscar-winning work on the Chronicles of Narnia. Howard, nice to see you again.
Good seeing you too.
Also joining us is co-author and veteran film journalist Marshall Julius. Marshall, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you for having me on, Skid. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you both, and we're going to get right into this. So, The Masters of Makeup Effects will be available in less than 2 weeks, and is available for pre-order now. I've been lucky enough to peruse an early release copy, but let me hand it back to you guys. What should readers expect of this book?
I think what they're going to be able to see is first, there's over 1,000 amazing photographs in this book that we gathered and accumulated from all the contributors. And Marshall and I ended up interviewing almost 70 people, from like makeup artists to visual effects artists to directors to writers to editors, film editors, because we really wanted to cast a wide net as far as, what this was about. And what I really, really like about this book is, and unlike any other book, this is all firsthand accounts. This is from their mouth. And that's what makes it really, really special and really unique. The inspiration for the book was a book from the 80s called Making a Monster that Al Taylor and Sue Roy wrote. I loved that book as a kid. And what it was is each chapter was about a makeup artist, and that really inspired me. And I had said to Marshall, I want to do something like that, but not chapters on each person. I want to kind of spread it across. So Marshall kind of came up with the format, which was great. And really, there's 15 chapters, and in each chapter is about something different, about the film industry and about the world of makeup effects. Once we interviewed everybody, and we did about between 2 to 3 hours per person, which was a lot of words. Marshall transcribed everything and went through it, and then put all the interviews and all the discussions in the proper chapters. But again, I think what makes this so amazing is it's from John Landis, who is a great director who did American Werewolf and Thriller, things he has to say about makeup effects that he's done, in the past, or Fred Raskin, who's an editor, James Gunn and Quentin Tarantino's editor, and talks about how he utilizes the makeup effects. So it's really a great chronicle of what we do for a living and how it's utilized and all the fun we have. And, some of it's a headache and some of it's not, but it always ends up being tons of fun. Wouldn't you say that that's about right, Marshall?
Absolutely. I mean, we don't shy away from the tougher side of the business, but it's very celebratory, the tone of it. I mean, if I had to describe the book in one sentence, I would say it is the greatest coffee table book of its generation. If I could have like 2 sentences, I would probably say it's from insiders, but it's not for insiders. It's not for people who are, pursuing a career in the business. It's for anybody who has an interest in film, in TV, in art, in just wonderful backstage stories. I mean, a lot of we have a whole chapter of advice, and this is, it's just great life advice. Frankly, it's like if you're from successful people, from people who've worked hard to get where they are and have to work well in groups and teams and in high pressure situations. And I think there's stuff there that applies to everybody. But Howard was very clear at the beginning that he didn't want it to be like a how-to. There's nothing instructional. You're not going to learn how to how to run foam or put pieces on or do any of that stuff. But we do talk about the art of it. We talk about the creation of things, the thought process that goes behind it. And so there's nothing to exclude anyone. And that's why I something I really love about it. It's for everybody and should be bought by everybody. Okay, that just sounds like a pitch now.
Well, I know you guys have both been talking about this project for a long time. And then how did it actually come together?
Marshall and I have known each other for like 16 years. We met each other when I was in London doing press for the first Narnia film. And I ended up, part of the gig was like I gave a little talk and then I made up every interviewer. as a character from Narnia, and so I made Marshall up as Mr. Tumnus, as a fawn, but he was more Mr. Bumnus than he was Mr. Tumnus.
You
So,
said I was an excellent fawn.
I'm sorry. Yes, he was the best fawn ever, and he was a very
better
good
than that McAvoy chap, anyway.
Yes, and look what happened. Never heard of McAvoy.
I know exactly. And look, here I am.
Anyhow, Marshall had, for the last 15, 16 years, has been asking about writing a book, and I've just been too busy and didn't really feel like I was at a point where I was ready to do it. And then the pandemic hit, and Marshall said, well, now you have no excuse, because I know you're sitting at home for the next 5 to 6 months, and let's figure out this idea. And we did, and it was great. And Marshall and I talked every single day and figured out what we wanted to do. And it's a great collaboration, actually. I mean, there's nothing better than working with someone, one, who you are friends with that you like a lot, and two, that is super talented. It's like, I know what I want, but I'm not a writer, but Marshall is a great writer. And so the combination of my access to everybody that we talk to, and Marshall then, being a great wordsmith that he is, brought it to life, and was just a great partnership.
Howard's being modest. It's not just access to the people. I mean, yeah, that is huge. As a journalist, I've written projects in the past, and it's really hard. It's a nightmare and a headache trying to get access to all the people you need to speak to. Whereas Howard's like, oh yeah, I emailed them, we're talking to them tomorrow. And it's like, it's just a completely different world. But it's not just access, it's Howard has an incredible insight into, he is one of those guys. He understands the business inside and out, has boundless enthusiasm for it. He knew all the best questions. I mean, it has amazing instincts. The interviews that we did, it wouldn't have been a fraction as good without Howard. So it's like, it was an amazing collaboration. I mean, it did, from the moment that I said to Howard, let's do it now, it's like, hooray, there's a worldwide pandemic, and we know not only that we're at home, but all the people we want to talk to is at home. It was like, talk about, Skid, the silver lining to a pandemic. It was like, we started that moment, didn't we? I mean, by the next day, we'd already made up provisional lists of chapters and the people you wanted to speak to, and we were just all in immediately. And it felt like we were like that for the 2 years it took to actually put it together. What was it, 1.75 years or something?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, man, it was a lot of hard work. I mean, interviewing, organizing, writing it, and then trying to find a publisher. And this is the thing too. People think like, oh, I'm going to write a book and I'll just publish it. It's like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. I mean, my wife and I, Marion, and I went to this Barnes and Noble bookstore in the Valley, in the San Fernando Valley, and we looked through all the entertainment books and wrote down all the names of all the publishers that would perhaps be good to reach out to. And we reached out to all of them. And out of all of them, we heard back. Well, we heard back from everybody, which was mostly thank you, but no thank you. They really felt like the book was kind of a little too niche for them. But we ended up having like 2 or 3 publishers that really wanted to do it. And we ended up deciding on going with Welbeck Publishing in London. That's the thing too. It's like, it's not, you can self-publish a book. That's great, but you're not going to get 20,000 copies out there. You're not going to have the widespread. Maybe you'll sell what you can sell. If you put it on Amazon, I have friends that certainly have self-published books and graphic novels, and that's fantastic. And I, always supporting them and buying them and so forth. But this was something different.
When the books arrived, Howard and I both got our books recently, and you get your author copies a little ahead of time. And if we'd self-published, I think that the quality of it would have been, iffy, as we say in England, to say the least. It would be okay. Whereas our book is, the covers have like raised lettering inside. The pages are like those heavy sort of clay paper, they're shiny and glossy. The book's got a good weight to it. It's like you hold it and you think this is like a proper thing. Howard and I are both obsessed with movie books and have been collecting them, and have, shelves full of them. We worked really hard to make something that we would want on our own shelves. And the thought of having, other people having our book and treasuring our book on their shelves, and it may be even, inspiring some, younger kids to get into the business the same way that, Howard was inspired by Making a Monster. I mean, that's incredibly cool. So I just answered one question. I probably answered a future question there too. So I'll back down now.
Tell me more about the contributors, given a bigger sense of the just both the breadth and the depth of contribution.
What we wanted to do is hit everybody. It wasn't just going to be like, the top 10 guys. Obviously we reached out to Rick Baker, and Rick was really obliging. And Rick Baker, has the most Academy Awards, like I think 7 Academy Awards for his work for makeup films like American Werewolf and Men in Black and The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. I mean, Rick is really like, he's the guy I grew up like admiring as a kid. I was like, love Rick Baker. So, but we talked to Rick Baker. We talked to, Greg Canham, who did Lost Boys and has numerous Oscars as well, and Titanic. And Greg is a real amazing makeup guy and did one of my favorite werewolves, which is the Ozzy Osbourne werewolf from Bark at the Moon video, which I love. Kevin Yeager, who did Face Off and the Bill and Ted movies, and Bill Corso, who is really an amazing designer and makeup artist. And
Kazu's a genius.
That's right, Kazuhira, who has 2 Oscars and probably another one coming up once that Leonard Bernstein movie comes out next year. Kazu did Bombshell and Darkest Hour. Kazu's one of the greatest and brilliant minds of all time. So we really hit a lot of people. The thing also that we did is we went all around the world. So, for instance, we interviewed Eva von Baer and Luve Larson, who did the Baron Harkonnen for Dune, on top of a whole bunch of other things. Interviewed David and Muncie from Spain, who did a lot of the Guillermo del Toro work, Devil's Backbone, and then one for Pan's Labyrinth. So, we really went all over the place. A lot of artists in the UK, Mark Coulier and Barry Gower, who did Game of Thrones, did this last season of Stranger Things.
And Nick Dubman, who basically did all the Harry Potters.
Yeah,
amazing stuff. He told us fantastic stories about the Harry Potter movies, the films that these guys have worked on, and even if you haven't heard of all of these people, definitely by the end of the book, you're going to know who they are. But even going into the book, you may not know their names, but you will know the makeups that they worked on. The Jack Nicholson Joker, the Heath Ledger Joker. We have the stories. The Elephant Man from the black and white 80s British classic. We have the stories from the horses' mouths of all of those makeups and their creation. Every time we did another interview, and it felt like we were just ticking off this amazing checklist of iconic films, classic creatures and makeup effects, and building up a really fascinating picture of what it's like to work in the makeup industry. I asked Howard before we started if I should do any sort of research, if I should read up on anything. And he said not to bother, that by the time we got to the end of all the interviews, that I would know everything I needed to know. And he's right. And I think that we managed to impart that. So when you read the book, by the end of it, you've got the same picture, I think, that I got, how it all came to be. And it's just fun. It's just so much fun. Howard's number one word is fun. And, it's like, because if it's not fun, what's the point of doing it?
And we set up the interview process and putting everybody at ease. It's like, we're just going to talk like we were at dinner or something like that. And it just kind of just had a natural, organic flow every conversation. And it wasn't like, even though Marshall and I wrote up questions and sent them the questions prior, you might ask a question, this, and then out of that answer, there's like 5 new questions. And you're like, oh, what about this? Or what about that? And then we did a lot. It was just really friendly conversation. And that made it really easy, because there's not everybody is like Marshall and I, who are very like open and love talking and very, just that sort of way, and there's a lot of guys that are very much introverts and
some people need a bit more coaxing, but we had the time, didn't we? We had the time to do that.
Great.
And we weren't worried either about, like, we had a bunch of questions, but if somebody didn't want to talk about something, or they wanted to talk about something else, or we thought we would get some A from them, but we ended up getting B. And the point is that we actually just took the best of every chat and we put it in the book. And, out of the hundreds of thousands of words that we ended up with, we ended up using, the 70,000 best words out of like 140 hours of interviews. We used the cream of the crop, the funniest and the most interesting stories.
The amazing photographs themselves could support a book, but then combined with really these nuggets of insight. The process of taking all of that material and turning it into this book, that sounds like an overwhelming task.
Well, Howard, you should talk about the pictures, because that was no less Herculean a task than organizing the words.
So people were very, very gracious. We ended up collecting 4,000 photos, and there's about 1,000 photos we were able to use, just because our publisher was like, okay, guys, it's too many photos. Like, got to kick back. And I was like, but I love this one. There's so many photos I wish we could have used. Hopefully this book will do well and have a great response around the world. And we'll get to do another volume, because there's so much that's missing. And also, there's a lot of people we didn't get to interview, which I really wanted to do. And we Marshall and I blocked out X amount of time, months, to like, okay, in the end of August of 2020, we have to be done interviewing, because we have to start writing. We have to deliver the book, this date. So we backed it all up. But there's a lot of people that we didn't get to talk to, which I feel bad about. But hopefully we'll do another volume, and then we can include them on top of other things we didn't get to include in this book. But the photos were amazing. I just poured over, and Marshall and I would, again, talk every single day and go through everything. Like, our fingers are on every single page of this book. They would send us, their version, and then Marshall and I would cut and paste, on Photoshop, like, no, this here, this goes here, this word, no, this is wrong, And so once we put it all together and they kept sending it to us, then we had to do all the captions, and we wanted to make sure everybody got credit. Like, I always hated as a kid looking at a photo and there was like John Chambers and unknown artists, work on. I'm like, who are those unknown artists? And, we researched, like, there were people I wasn't sure who it was, maybe in a photo that, Neil Gorton, who's a big UK makeup artist, big Doctor Who, and I mean, tons and tons of great makeups. And he's like, oh, well, that's so-and-so, and that's so-and-so. And I'm like, good, I want to put all that in there. So we really made sure we covered everyone. I don't want anybody who's in the book to not have their name in the book, So Marshall and I were really, really careful and cautious about it. But it's a huge labor of love, wouldn't you say, Marshall?
Oh, for sure. There hasn't been a day when I haven't worked on the book since the moment we had that first conversation. And since sending it off, it was like immediately went into, okay, now I want everybody to know about it mode. But I just love it. It's just so much fun. I'm so proud of it. I've just never worked on anything that I've been prouder of, or that was more fun or interesting to put together. Just the whole process was kind of thrilling. And we were lucky that with our publishers, they were incredibly patient. I mean, Howard said, our fingers are on every page, and we really are, because I mean, literally, we would go through every single page, every picture, and we would say, oh, well, this should be here, or this picture needs to be blown up a little more. And we were just, we super micromanaged them. And I've never had an experience working with publishers or an editor who would actually indulge us to that point, but they knew that we knew what we were talking about, and we knew our audience, and they trusted us, and I'm so glad they did. But also it means that if people don't like the book, which I don't think it's going to happen, we've had nothing but good things, but we've really got no one else to blame but ourselves, because literally it's like it's us, and we had a good editor, Ross, and a great designer, Russ, which did get confusing sometimes. But yeah, we loved it. We didn't want to, just provide, say, here are the pictures, here are the words, and just go ahead and do your best. We were just wanted it to be, like I said, those books that we grew up with, or better. It just had to be something special, and it damn well is.
Well, with the idea of turning some of our listeners into readers, is there an anecdote or two you would share as a teaser, like just sort of the flavor of what people can expect?
There are so many stories in the book that I love, and a lot of them are stories about the artists growing up before they had any professional gigs, when they were, nerds in their bedroom making masks or experimenting on their friends or with their brothers. There are lots of hilarious stories, and you wonder how they all even survived it. But I suppose, as I'm a big Star Wars fan, so huge Star Wars fan, classic, the classic trilogy especially, and we interviewed Christopher Tucker, who did the makeup effects for the Elephant Man, and famously everybody agrees that had there been an Oscar for best makeup then, he would have won it. And in a way, it was sort of a scandal that he didn't win an Oscar for that amazing makeup. And they actually established it the following year. And Rick Baker, who is in our book, won it for American Werewolf in London. But we tracked down Christopher Tucker. He lives in England. He's very old, hilariously eccentric, very interesting. I've become friends with him. And after we talked about quite extensively about the Elephant Man, he sort of let slip that he worked on Star Wars, and I'd sort of heard a rumor of that, but there's not very much known about what he's done on Star Wars. And the stuff, and I actually had ended up. He used to call me after we did the interview. He would then just call me and talk more. And he would say, "Oh, I hope you're recording these pearls." And so it's like I always made sure that I had my tape recorder ready, my digital recorder. And like whenever he called, I'd be like, "Okay, Christopher, tell me about this, tell me about that." And over about 4 or 5 more conversations, he would just say little things about Star Wars and stuff that he worked on. And he worked on, and it's like we managed to build up this whole extra thing. And stuff that I'd never read before in Star Wars. So he worked on the Cantina sequence. And loads of people worked on that scene. I mean, Rick Baker worked on that scene later, but before he came on and produced more Aliens, you had was it Stuart Freeborn and brought on Christopher Tucker to sort of like co-run the Cantina sequence. And Christopher saying, "Oh yes, he was talking about characters that he created," and it was like. And we know every single character in that cantina now. They're all incredibly famous, and so he created the character that starts the fight with Luke. He's wearing the orange top. He had those sort of things on his front. At school, we used to call him Bumface. Apparently, in America, they all called him Arseface. But I think the Star Wars people say that his name is Ponda Baba, but it's like he'll always be Bumface to me. But he created him, and he's like talking about taking stuff home and working on it, and then. Oh, and he worked on Chewbacca. He actually helped designing Chewbacca. And it's like, I've never read anywhere about that. So he got all that amazing stuff. And the most terrifying thing, though, he said at the end, once we finished filming, we said to George, "What should we do with all these aliens?" And George said, "Oh, just throw them away." And so he tells the story about how they actually go. They went outside. Do you call it a skip in America? The big dustbin that people deliver, and then you just throw it all out.
Big dumpster. No, we don't. We do not call it a skip.
Yeah, we call it like a dumper, a giant dumper.
Yeah. So basically, they went out to one of those. There was one on the street, and they just threw everything in the dumper, like all this stuff. And Christopher Tuck said, had he known that stuff would have been as valuable. Then obviously he would have just put it all in the boot of his car. But he said to me, and this was my favorite quote, he said, "But I could never conceive that anyone outside of a mental asylum would ever want any of this stuff." I think if you're a Star Wars fan, and believe me, there were a few details I left out. That was like an absolute thrill for me.
Howard, how about you? Any particular anecdotes that stuck with you?
There's a lot, but Ken Diaz, who's in the book, who's a really prolific makeup artist, worked on The Thing and Heartbeats and tons of movies. And Zorro. There's always been like an urban legend about his relationship with Mickey Rourke. And he's done a lot of movies with Mickey. And, Mickey's a very unique personality. We've worked with him at K&B before. Anyhow, there's always been this rumor that Mickey and Ken got into serious altercations during filming over one thing or another. And we asked Ken, and Ken told us the story, and it's all true. Everything I heard, all of us heard from all this, again, like the urban legend lore is true with Kenny, Mickey attacking Ken one night in an alleyway while they're shooting Barfly. And then, the next night, Kenny was standing by with a 2x4 with a powder puff taped to it. And when Mickey walked in, just started pounding Mickey in the face with it, and just those two guys were like really going at it. Like a lot of the cuts and stuff on Mickey Rourke and Barfly are real. It's caused by Kenny in a makeup trailer brawl. And I loved all that stuff because there it was. That's again, everyone talks about the legend of Kenny Diaz, and that was a true legend, and that he talked about. So, but yeah, like Marshall said, there's so many great nuggets through the course of this book. And even though there's so many people we spoke to that I've known for 30, 40 years, I learned something new about all my friends, and things I never knew about. And also, the book is not a trash book. It's not like this guy's talking poorly about. We really, and nobody talked poorly about anybody, because of the generations we're all from. We all are very supportive and encouraging and inspired by one another. And so that was really nice. It's not a tell-all book on any level. These are all personal stories that people tell. Lois Burwell, who is an amazing makeup artist who worked on Highlander and Legend and Saving Private Ryan and all these movies, talks about co-applying the darkness makeup on Tim Curry with Nick Dudman. And that's one of my all-time favorite makeups. I love that makeup. I think it's perfect. And that makeup was created and designed by Rob Bottin, who, is a mastermind, that did The Thing and The Howling and Explorers and a million other shows that I love. Yeah, I mean, it's chock full of stuff. And like Marshall said, you may not know who a lot of these people are when you start the book, but at the end of the book, you're going to know who everybody is. Yeah. And it's nice. I really love it. I'm really proud of it. I'm really excited. It's surreal. It feels surreal, like to get our first copies from the publisher, which we did, like Marshall said, this week. We've been working on this so long, and it's just, now that it's real, like it's done. Like, here it is, the book's sitting right here. And I'm like, wow. So I guess we are finished.
On that note, we're going to call it a wrap. Thanks so much for your time today, guys.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Listeners, I always appreciate your feedback. You'll find my contact info at our website, belowtheline.biz. That's B-I-Z. You'll also find past episodes and links to all of our social media, so check it out. Now, guys, the book is available for order, but I know that our LA-based listeners also have some chances coming up to meet you guys in person.
That is correct. So yeah, you can order it on Amazon.com in the UK and the US right now. And we have some cool events coming up. So on September 18th at Dark Delicacy, which is in Burbank, California, from 3 to 5, we're going to be doing a signing there. And that's going to be chock full of contributors. We've got like 20 other people coming. Then on September 20th, we're doing this live event at the Montalban Theater in Hollywood on Vine Street. And that's going to be starting at 6 p.m. on the 20th. And that's going to be great. And we're going to have a handful of contributors there. And we'll be projecting photos and stuff from the book. And Marshall's going to lead a Q&A. And it's going to be really wonderful. And then on the 25th of September, we'll be at the Academy Museum signing books from 1 to 3 p.m. And there'll be a handful of contributors there as well. And when I say a handful, it's no less than 10 for the most part. So it's going to be great. So, and plus it's a fun day to spend at the Academy Museum and go to Fanny's and get lunch afterward.
And actually, because we have such a bewildering number of things happening, I mean, in a good way, lots of signings, lots of different places where you can get the book, and we have some wonderful t-shirt merch as well. And so what we've done is we've built our own website, so mastersmakeupeffects.net, and there you'll find details of every signing and any merch that you might want to get as well, links to wherever you want to buy the books, and lots of other fun stuff. So that will be a good place to go to for like all the information that you need. So mastersmakeupeffects.net.
Well, Marshall, thanks for sharing that website. We'll put that out there as well, folks, where you can go to learn more. My closing credits, thanks to Curtis Five for our music, John Wan for our logo, and to all of our listeners, I appreciate you. Please rate us wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends. Thanks again from Below the Line.